Hey, it's Marvolo and welcome back to my channel. I was recently hospitalized and while I was there I made a quick video during my stay. I didn't give a lot of details, but I said I would go into them later. I'm going to try to tell this story now, though it's been about a month and I was on a lot of different medications in there, so things are kind of blurry now, but I'm going to try to put this story together as best that I can. Before I really get into the story, I want to say thank you to my friends and family who came and visited me and sent me kind words of encouragement while I was in the hospital. So I didn't just wake up one day and decide to go to the hospital. There was a period of decline in my health, and it started all the way back in August. It was nothing serious, it just started with some fevers, but that's the first sign that something was going on. I happened to go out of town to see the person I'm romantically involved with. I guess I can go ahead and call him my boyfriend, that'll make it simpler. While I was down there visiting him, I was having difficulties keeping an appetite and I was vomiting quite often. As soon as I got back home from seeing my boyfriend, I went to the ER and I had a UTI and was dehydrated. I also had elevated liver enzymes and inflammation in my liver. I thought maybe it was just from taking a lot of Tylenol though, so I kind of dismissed it. I was prescribed antibiotics for my UTI, which is pretty normal. Not in everyone with Crohn's, I don't think, but for me in particular, and plenty of other people, antibiotics can trigger a Crohn's flare. It kills off some of the healthy bacteria that are in your gut microbiome, and it helps to make it a happy, healthy place for them to live, and it just triggers a Crohn's flare, and that's what happened to me. I just started having more and more bowel movements. I know it's probably not pleasant to listen to, but you know what? That's the reality of the situation. Yeah, I was having a lot of diarrhea increasing from the antibiotic use, but I needed to get rid of the UTI, so it is what it is. So I ended up going to the ER again because things were just getting worse. I was keeping less and less food down, vomiting more, having less of an appetite, continued bowel movement issues, and I was starting to lose blood with my bowel movements as well. We have two main hospitals in town, and one of them has a much longer ER wait time, but my GI likes me to use that one. I ended up having to wait for 5 hours in the waiting room just to be seen. They put me in a hall bed for about half an hour, and then hardly even did anything to treat me. They gave me IV Zofran, no fluids, nothing else, and sent me on my way. And my condition didn't get better. IV Zofran only works, you know, just right then. It's not like it's a permanent solution, so things just kept getting worse, or, well, staying the same, getting worse, you know. I was losing more and more blood. I finally was able to see my gastroenterologist, and we decided it would be a good idea to try to get me onto a new medication. It's called Entyvio, and it's a biologic. I'll talk more about Entyvio and biologics in a future video. Just know that it's a certain type of medication, in this case through an IV to treat Crohn's disease. But with my insurance, you have to get a prior authorization, insurance approval to show them that we've tried cheaper other therapeutic remedies, because this is like a $5,000 medication. But it generally works. It has a good track record. I started getting nervous because I knew my boyfriend was coming to visit me soon, and he had never seen me in a Crohn's flare. Never had seen me that sick, and relationships and chronic illness are just a really weird, uncomfortable thing for a lot of reasons. I mean, even for healthy people, a lot of times it's weird for your significant other to see you sick for the first time. I can talk more about chronic illness and relationships in a different video, but that's not what I want to make this about right now. The whole weekend he was here, we tried to do things, but I was in pain, a lot of pain. I was just miserable. I could hardly eat anything. I was only keeping down non-solids, and the solid foods that I tried to eat would all come up, except for I managed to keep down half a pot cookie during that time, and that was pretty cool. It gave me some pain relief. Before going back home, my boyfriend went with me to the ER. I had a blood draw, which again showed elevated levels in my liver, and this time also showed anemia, which makes sense with all the blood loss I was having. I was given IV Zofran to help with the nausea, a bag of saline fluid to help rehydrate me, and IV Dilaudid. This was my first experience with Dilaudid that I can remember. I think I might have had it after I had abdominal surgery 2 years ago, but I don't remember much of that. The Dilaudid took away my pain almost instantly. I mean, it is an IV opiate medication, but it made me feel like I was somersaulting backward. It was really nice to not be in pain, but they sent me home after that with no plans for treatment or improvement. My boyfriend left, and I spent the next week having things get progressively worse. Actually, not even a full week passed. I went to the ER that Sunday, and then that coming Friday night, Friday the 13th of October, wow, I ended up back in the ER, which, side note, probably not the best day to go into the ER. Side note, you know, they gave me fluids, but this time 3 or 4 bags because they knew I must be dehydrated. My labs had come back even worse for my blood, so they were more concerned. They also gave me the pain medication, Dilaudid, and they decided they needed to do a CT scan of my abdomen to see what was going on and see how inflamed things were, which it turned out was very inflamed. They decided they wanted to admit me and it took until 4 a.m. for me to get to bed, so that was a little bit of a rough night. Turns out this is the kind of hospital that has shared rooms, so I ended up having 3 roommates. The first one was an older lady, and she had arrived earlier at the ER the same day as me, so she had gotten to bed way before me. She was in for heart failure, and at the time I thought that was pretty serious. I mean, heart failure, that's serious. I thought it would be like a long-time hospital stay, but I quickly learned that I was incorrect in that assumption. Heart failure patients often get to leave pretty quickly. It's a good thing she didn't stay around long though, because this woman was a complainer. She complained about everything. If you gave her sausage with her breakfast, she'd complain that there wasn't toast. While I was eating broth, because I was put on a clear liquid diet as soon as I was admitted to the hospital. So for part of my treatment, I was put on 40 milligrams of SoluMedrol. Pretty quickly, that was boosted up to 40 milligrams of SoluMedrol through IV 3 times a day, which is a lot, but at first it was just once a day. When you have a Crohn's flare-up, steroids are usually the #1 first thing that they'll send in to try to control it. They also had me on IV fluids to help keep me hydrated with all the bowel movements, and protonics, which instead of Zofran is what they were giving me, and it's something that helps to keep your stomach acid in check. I don't know exactly how it worked, but it worked well. They also had me on pain medication. I was allowed to have morphine, Dilaudid, and oxycodone, but we mostly just kept me on oxycodone. The morphine was only used once the whole time I was there, and Dilaudid was supposed to be for breakthrough pain, but ended up being used a lot more frequently. I don't think that sleeping in the same room as me was good for any of my roommates. They generally didn't get a lot of sleep because I was up a lot to go to the bathroom, and I was on the side of the room without the bathroom. So every time I would get up to go to the bathroom and drag my loud as fuck IV pole with me, my roommate would wake up. She was grumpier in the morning, and I was hungrier than I was the first day, having been on only clear liquids. So she really started to get to me, especially with her complaining about her food while I was eating a plate of just Jello and broth and other liquid things that don't really provide sustenance. That second day was also the day that I received a blood transfusion. My labs had dropped and they were concerned, so I got 2 units transfused of blood. I never really thought a blood transfusion, other than that it's blood, would be much different than any other IV infusion, and boy was I wrong. It is so fucking cold, to the point of being unbearable and painful to me. I've talked to other people, no one else has ever described it quite like this, but that's how it was for me. I was so happy when my roommate finally got discharged. I don't remember if it was later that day or if it was the next day, but she finally got discharged. She had been comparing the hospital to a prison and just been generally bothersome to everyone. I could tell the nurses were getting sick of her shit too. It was so great to have her gone. That night though that she left, I got a new roommate in, and she was also in for heart failure. When she came in, it was really late at night, and she came in with her fiance. And he made a huge stink over the fact that he could not sleep in the room. When you're in a shared room, generally in a hospital, you're not allowed to have overnight guests. You can have visitors any other time, but you can't have overnight guests sleeping in your room because of the other person in the room. It might make them uncomfortable or feel unsafe. I got to know him the next day, and he was actually kind of cool. He bought me an extension cord so I could charge my phone, and we talked about superheroes and Star Wars, so that was cool. I finally got my diet changed from clear liquid to full liquid, which is pretty much the same thing, except for I was now allowed to have soups that were not clear, like cream of chicken soup. Now, I've never really cared for cream of chicken soup, but holy shit, it was like the best thing in the world, and I wanted to lick the bowl at that time. I also could then have Ensure nutritional drinks, which I was excited about, but weren't very good. And chocolate milk as well. I had chocolate milk like every day I was in the hospital. My new roommate was not a complainer. They came in and talked to her about how she needed to quit smoking and have a more low sodium, low fat diet. She did not complain about it very much, and she took it really well. She was pretty positive and made the experience better. I was almost sorry to see her go when she checked out of the hospital. She was the most pleasant roommate I had. During that first week in the hospital, not a lot happened in my condition that really changed. They were doing the SoluMedrol 3 times a day. I had the painkillers, and that was it pretty much. They kept monitoring my blood and it wasn't dropping down, but none of my other symptoms were going away, and the steroids really should have done something by then. They were starting to get concerned that the steroids might not be working. Throughout that week, particularly the first week, maybe a little into the second too, I had a lot of people come visit me. Friends and family visiting me, and I really appreciated all of it. I was given books, plants, fake flowers, real flowers, food once I was allowed to actually have it, bottles of Gatorade. My grandma even bought me a Nook e-reader so that I could read more books in the hospital. It was almost like a mini Christmas or birthday, except that I was miserable and everyone felt sorry for me. So in that way it was nothing like a Christmas or a birthday, but still, I don't know why people feel the need to give gifts when you're in the hospital. I mean, gifts are nice, but honestly, I ended up having so much stuff to pack up. I had like 3 bags worth of gifts to take home with me. It was ridiculous. With the pain being worse, I was using oxycodone less and less to manage it and using the IV Dilaudid more and more. It worked faster and more efficiently to me, but it didn't last as long. But that's what they started using really to manage my pain. I had a lot of inconsistent pain management and it was weird. For the rest of my first week, I was lucky enough to have my room to myself, which was wonderful. I was able to finally switch to the side of the room that had the bathroom on it too, so I was like, yeah, if I have to have another roommate, at least I have the bathroom now. By the end of that week, I found out I was getting a new roommate, and I was like, well, hopefully at least it's not another heart failure patient, because come on, let's get some diversity of the illnesses up in here. She was a heart infection patient. Not that far off, still heart stuff. I was like, oh damn, that's pretty similar. Well, not really. I learned a lot about this roommate during my days spent with her, and it turns out she's an addict. She's addicted to heroin, meth, marijuana, cigarettes, and alcohol, is what she told me. And the reason she had a heart infection was from using dirty needles to shoot up. Addiction is real, and being an addict doesn't make you a bad person. It's just really hard to, I'm sure, live with an addict or be in a hospital room with them. She made it very hard to sleep. She would throw fits in the middle of the night asking for the medication I had, IV Dilaudid. She wanted opiates via IV, and they're not allowed to give them to you if you are a recovering addict. She threatened to leave. She said, I can medicate myself better at home. One night they did. The first night they gave her the Dilaudid, pissed the doctor off, and she just continued throwing fits, which made it very hard for me to sleep. And I was already very sleep deprived and emotional, so that just, you know, piled on. The second night that she was there, when I got out of the bathroom, there was some creepy guy there just whispering her name at her and poking her while she slept. And I was just like, what the fuck is happening here? There's no way I'm gonna sleep until this guy is gone. The first thing he said to me is, hey, do you want a piece of candy? Excuse me, can you be more creepy? I told him, I don't take candy from strangers, which, I mean, come on, you're creepy. You don't just meet someone and offer him candy. He thought that was funny though. I suggested that he leave her a note and come back in the morning, which he did. I told the nurses about the creepy guy and about my lack of sleep, and they managed to pull some strings and get me into a single bedroom. They said that usually patients with chronic diarrhea, while they're staying there, get their own room to begin with, and it's not really fair to anyone to have that kind of a bathroom shared situation when you're having so many bowel movements. I got a little more sleep being in there, but not by much. Between the pain and all the bowel movements, I still was not sleeping very well at all. I was finally moved to soft foods, so I could have yogurt, ice cream, pudding, eggs, other things that don't require a lot of chewing. It was so great to be able to eat really anything that wasn't a liquid. You'd think I would have had my spirits boosted by any of this, but honestly I was so exhausted and emotional, steroids factoring in too. I was crying all the time. Everything made me cry. Every doctor confrontation I was getting upset. It was over the top and ridiculous. I wouldn't have wanted to deal with me then. I was told I was entering into a sleep deprivation induced psychosis or something like that. My doctor at some point tried to put me on antidepressants, which caused a really big rift between us because I don't think you should use a permanent solution to treat a temporary problem. There's a whole bunch of stuff about why I don't want to be on antidepressants. I just got off of them in the summer and I've been happier without any in my life, and I'm not looking to get back on any, and I thought that was inappropriate of him and not his place. It ended up being sorted out. I wasn't put on them, and oh my god, it was a whole nightmare situation within my nightmare of being in the hospital already. During my second week in the hospital, they realized I wasn't really responding to the steroids, which is pretty rare in Crohn's patients. Usually Crohn's patients respond to steroids, and they didn't really know what to do about it. So the GI doctor was called in and I was scheduled for a colonoscopy. I got my colonoscopy on a Friday, and so I wasn't able to get the biopsy results, but he was able to tell me what it looked like and give me my own pictures to look at. And my intestines were ulcerated all over. He said there's usually skip spots with Crohn's disease. You have just ulceration and inflammation and bleeding all over in your intestines. And he said if something isn't done soon, you're going to have your entire colon surgically removed, which I don't want. So he started pushing for me to get on Entyvio. My insurance wasn't improving it, so he had to go over my insurance, go to the head of the hospital staff and ask them, like, will we take the charge for this if our insurance doesn't cover it? He ended up getting the Entyvio ordered and loaded. I'm really grateful that he made the steps necessary to get me there. I've had IV infusions before of similar types of medication, biologics, and they were pretty normal infusions. This burned, really burned, in my veins, and usually this infusion takes half an hour to 45 minutes. They had to slow it down, and when they slowed it down, it stopped burning. They slowed it down to almost take 2 hours. When we finally got my biopsy results back, they showed that I had CMV, so it wasn't just my Crohn's flaring up. CMV is short for cytomegalovirus, and I don't know a whole lot about it, but I've learned a little bit about it just from, having it. It's an infectious disease, and once you have it, it can reactivate at like any time. So that's cool. This was my first time ever finding out I had CMV, and it was causing, they think, the inflammation and ulcers in my intestines, though some of that could be from Crohn's too, it's hard to say. With Crohn's disease, I'm on medications that leave me immunocompromised, which is something that helps CMV to get in there and really give you that nasty infectious diseaseness that it has. I know, that's so scientific. On top of that, the steroids they put me on in the hospital, as well as the blood transfusion, are other things that make you more susceptible to getting a CMV infection. So we kind of created the perfect storm for CMV to rear its ugly head and fuck me up. We were going to get me started on the CMV medication, which had to be done twice a day via IV. However, the hospital I was at, they couldn't give me the CMV medication. It turns out, while it's not chemotherapy, it's mixed in a similar way to chemo drugs, and they can't administer chemo drugs in that hospital, so I had to be transferred. So on November 1st, they loaded me up in an ambulance and drove me across town to the other hospital. It was a small ambulance, but I was always curious to see the inside and experience an ambulance. It's not as exciting as you would expect. Very crammed. I was put into my own room, but I was in pediatrics. What? The first hospital I was at was being remodeled, but I was in the older facility. The new hospital I was at was much nicer, much newer, almost looks like a ski lodge. I had a gorgeous view out my window, and I even had a Wii in the room I was in, probably because of being in pediatrics, but still, it was kind of cool. I never used it, but still cool. Being in this hospital, I was finally able to start my CMV treatment medication, which is ganciclovir, in IV twice a day. You're supposed to be on it for a total of 3 weeks, but I was really hoping that I would not need to be on it for the full 3 weeks. Especially because they kind of used it often as a boost because there's an oral medication you can take, valganciclovir. And so they'll use the IV medication to get you started, get like kind of a jump start at it, and then you go home and take the oral ones. The first day went by all right. The second day, not so much. First off, I was accidentally given double my usual dose of Ativan, and I'm usually taking oral Ativan. They gave it to me in an IV. I ended up sleeping through most of the appointment with my GI doctor. Like, I would fall asleep while he was talking to me. So I didn't even get to meet with him. And I probably left a pretty bad impression on him too. Unfortunately, on only my second day in this hospital, I had to move again. Not to a different hospital, but a different floor. Pediatrics needed a bed cleared up because there was a new patient coming in, and I was the oldest in the pediatric unit, so they bumped me to oncology. And that day that I switched rooms, my boyfriend also arrived to visit me from out of town, which was a good thing. I needed that cuddling and that extra oxytocin to help me with the pain I was experiencing because they took away my IV pain medication. The nurses on the oncology floor, for the most part, were okay, but I had this one that was a nightmare. She was hesitant to give me my oxycodone and OxyContin, which were on my okay prescription list from the doctors, but she was telling me, you need to just visualize. I'm not capable of visualization, that's just not something my brain does. You just need to use visualization and meditation and distract yourself from the pain. No, I don't. I have real pain, and I need pain medication for it, and you're supposed to give it to me, so shut the fuck up and just do your job. My last day in the hospital was Sunday, November 4th. It was the 4th day that I was in the second hospital, and this nurse was really getting on my nerves. Being in there was really getting to me. The second hospital just was a nightmare for me, and I needed to go. I really didn't feel like they were doing much for me in the hospital anymore. They definitely weren't doing anything that I couldn't do from home. I was very adamant about wanting to leave, and they decided I could be discharged. And it worked out. It took all day for them to get me discharged, but I did leave. And that was all a little over a month ago. Things have improved slightly, not as much as I would have liked. It's not easy still. It's It's kind of terrible. I still have a lot of those symptoms that I was experiencing before happening now. I think I still have a really long way to go, but I also think I'm already through the worst of it, and that is something good to know. And I'm at home. It's so much better just to be in my own bed. I glazed over a lot of things, and I'm sure I forgot a lot of things because 1, I don't really want to remember a lot of this experience, 2, it's been about a month, and 3, I was on a lot of medications. But that's going to be it for this video. I hope it's not too long. I have a feeling it will be. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below and I'll try my best to get back to them. I'm also hoping to make more videos about chronic illness and Crohn's disease, so if you have any questions about that you'd like to have covered in a future video, leave that down below too, or reach out to me on any other social media. It's always in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. Special shout out to my Snapchat fam. You guys really helped me to keep more of a positive attitude and kept me going in the hospital, and I really appreciate it. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you're not already so you can stay updated for the next time I make a video. I love you guys and I'll see you again soon.